October the 14th, 2024. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a great day. I know Colette's having a bad day. She's stuck in Florida, where there's no power after Hurricane Milton. And there's millions of people also that evacuated up in that area. And they're kind of come back to hellish conditions, if they come back at all. So that's a good reminder that, of course, there's speculations that this was weather wars. I don't know if you've ever seen the clips from the History Channel talking about weather wars. It's quite interesting stuff. And we're going to do another time machine tonight. We got a poll for you tonight, all 5 of you. After a decade, we get 5 people. Should Fukushima nuclear meltdown site open a 6-week summer boot camp for pro-nuclear kids? Well, why not? That's a pretty good idea, isn't it? Well, two birds, one stone with that one. And there we go. Fukushima nuclear plant workers are walking into a certain death by radiation, the New York Post. Dead man walking. They're known as the Fukushima 50s. Now, we covered that in just one story. It took us almost 2 hours last night to get through. And they're Japan's only hope of avoiding a Chernobyl-like catastrophe. This is March the 17th, so the reactors have already blown up. And so you got all the media coming out, not all of them, I shouldn't say that, but the majority of them, well, it is true that all the media was coming out with that narrative, but there was dissenting voices for the first couple of years. There's none now. But by the 17th, the reactors looked like that. That was a few weeks later, right, this picture. But, you know, on the 17th, there was still... as you see, this is several weeks later. Do you see all kinds of construction equipment, 7,000 people working there? No, you don't, do you? Because you have fuel pools, reactor cores spewed all over the site. Again, you know, the people in the nuclear industry, after all these generations, 80 years, and the current last couple of generations, are the only way to describe them are insane. They got a degree, incredibly educated, but they're missing the human experience. Desperately battling to save potentially millions of their countrymen, knowing that even if they succeed, they'll likely die from lethal doses of radiation. If you're at the nuclear meltdown, you are dying from the nuclear radiation. You got fuel assemblies all over the site. So the gamma shines, the X-rays, the neutrons, the beta rays are just, they will melt your organs in just moments. There's nowhere you can step where you're not going to get a lethal dose. And so when you talk about they're battling and to save potentially, they're not battling. You can't. There's nothing you can do. They're nuclear meltdowns. But what we're trying to do is establish the fact that they lied right from the very inception of this event. This is not an accident. This is an event. They built the reactors on a coastline with over 1,000 earthquakes a year. They built it 65, 70 kilometers from the tectonic plates where they do that. And where they have a 3,000-year history, recorded history of tsunamis reaching several hundred feet high in the same spot. They were built to fail, clearly. And then on top of that, they put all the reactor cores over the last 40 years of its operations at the top of the buildings. So that would be lost too. It was an engineered collapse. And then they covered it up when it happened. So there was no way to come up with solutions. And they're quite proud of themselves, is what I've noticed about them. The Prime Minister, Nato Khan, virtually ordered the crews on a suicide mission. You're the only ones who can resolve a crisis. Retreat is unthinkable. But there was nothing you can do. Once the buildings blew up, what are you supposed to do? Once the inventory was lost, how are you going to get that back from the environment? You're not, right? So the whole story was structured so that when people started looking away from the tsunami and the trauma and the horror from that, which is absurd, incredible amount, very difficult to draw yourself away from that and look at the nuclear on top of that, right? And that you would now be lulled into complacency. You would retreat is unthinkable, but everything is already gone. Because the story that we're talking about is from the 17th. And 4 reactors, maybe the common spent fuel pool, maybe reactor 6. And we got the next second story. They're talking about 5 and 6 reactor fuel pools were uncovered, which meant they had no water, which meant they were melting down, wouldn't it? Because that's what happens. They melt down immediately. A nuclear scientist is something to be tracked, traced, and database. Everything they've ever done should be tracked, traced, and databased. If we ever come up with technology that can read people's minds, then the human experiment should be done on them to find out what other legacy of misery they created that we don't know about. The modern day samurai who have attained a mythic status among their countrymen are not afraid to die, a source close to them told the CBS. Again, this was all meant to prop up something that had already happened, pretend that it didn't happen. The workers, including cops, firefighters, soldiers, not nuclear scientists or nuclear academics or nuclear corporations. No, but people who know nothing about nuclear faced their greatest test at Reactor 4, where the fuel pool are believed to have run completely dry. Well, on the 17th, that's Reactor 4 up there. That's not believed to run dry, that's ran dry. And it's so sad when you read these stories, and that's why I'm censored so heavily. This morning, after 8 hours after the video last night, I had 124 views. 19 hours later, I had 154 views, 20 extra views. 20 hours later, I had 154. 21 hours later, still had 154. This morning, I had 37 thumbs up. Tonight, I have 38. 11 hours later, 12 hours later. So the censorship is just insidious because these people understand that a single person articulating what happened is a threat to their existence. I don't know why, because there's nobody watches my show, is it? How many people is on my show again tonight? $15 viewers, 11 likes, 11 votes. Should Fukushima nuclear meltdown site open a 6-week summer boot camp for pro-nuclear kids? So if everything is hunky-dory, like the apologists are claiming, why not have a summer boot camp, right? And although the workers are dressed head to foot in protective bodysuits, there's actually paper suits, the same suits you use for painting in your house. These are not paper. These are not protective suits. They don't have a single attribute that's protective. And I know years ago there was this troll who used to come into the comment whenever I would say that and say, well, actually they do, Dan. They can protect you from alpha, or they can protect you from fallout. And I got sick of it and finally blocked them because it's completely dishonest to suggest you're at a nuclear meltdown and that a paper suit can protect you. It's criminal to suggest that. The In protective bodysuits, the gear provides little protection against the radiation, which is at 4 times the level that causes cancer. The level there will melt your organs in about 15 minutes. You can run past it, but your organs will still melt. And eventually you're going to squat down and try to excrete your organs because they're liquefied. You're going to die right there. And you're so radioactive they can't bury you in a graveyard because everybody walks past your grave will get incredibly radioactive. Like the contempt that this industry has for everybody, there's nothing else comes close to it. And they're more dangerous than every disease ever created by every disease we know about. This industry is more dangerous than that to the existence of all species, not just humans. And suggesting is that 4 times the level that cause radiation. At Chernobyl, helicopter crew members who dropped sand over the plant died soon afterwards. Well, you won't find that on the Wikipedia page or a UN page or International Atomic Energy Agency or the UNSCLEAR or ERPA, the ICRP. What you'll find is 28 people died at Chernobyl. That's what they'll tell you. And I mean, just to keep that lie alive for 37 years, because that's an unbelievable lie. It was actually all 600 helicopter pilots died.
It was heroism.
During this operation, 600 pilots are fatally contaminated with radiation. All of them will die. But their efforts only buy a few days. Although it has been covered over, the fire still isn't out.
So all 600 helicopter pilots died. At one point yesterday, the radiation levels surged, and Chernobyl, of course, was a single reactor. It was a graphite reactor. Each of Fukushima's reactors are hundreds of times worse. At one point yesterday, the radiation levels surged so high, all the workers at the plant were ordered out, but 5 hours later, they were sent back in after levels dropped. It actually doesn't work that way. When the radiation is not like snow that falls on the ground and then melts. They were sent back in after levels dropped. If you believe anything a nuclear scientist tells you, then you're a victim. Nevertheless, some areas of the cripple complex, those closest to the reactors, remain too hot for anyone to get near. Once the plume goes through the site, you can't go back in that area. You just can't do it. And the radiation would be high enough you would receive a lethal dose in something like 16 seconds. A nuclear safety engineer told the National Public Radio. Right, so they leave you completely confused, incapable of understanding the very fundamentals, the very basics, the very foundation, let alone anything else. Under current conditions, the Fukushima 50, which is a complete fable, and I don't know if fable is the right word, it's a blatant fucking lie, are receiving the same amount of radiation in 1 hour that a U.S. nuclear worker would be exposed to over their entire career, Richardson says. Again, and right there, so they use all these different people, right? And you become completely confused of what's what and who's who, and you become overwhelmed. They overwhelm you with propaganda coming from so many different directions. Under current conditions, I got to say that again, the Fukushima 50 are receiving the same amount of radiation in 1 hour a nuke plant worker would be exposed to over their entire career. And how the hell did we ever get to... Like, the reason we're at this position is because most of humanity are cowards now. 40 years ago, whoever said stuff like this would have got the shit kicked out of them. That would have been the end of the problem. The rest of the creeps wouldn't have opened their mouths and used those connotations again, right? Suggesting that when you go to a nuclear meltdown and then you won't survive 1 hour. Suggesting that's the same dose you get over a lifetime at a nuclear disease factory. I can't handle it. I can't comprehend why they're so evil. I just can't comprehend it. And who are you, Dana? Well, I'm Dana, that's right. I'm a nuclearproctologist.org. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. We're in Canada. I don't hide away from anybody, unlike the disgusting parasitic nuclear industry. I don't have anything to be ashamed of. I'm unbelievably honest. And I don't talk about stuff I know nothing about. And what I do is I take their documentation and I go through it looking for mistakes or blatant lies, which is what you're going to find. Every single sentence or paragraph, it's impossible for them to write a story that's not full of lies. It's just simply impossible. See, at Chernobyl, they said 28 people died within a month. Another 19 died over the next 8 years. It was over 1 million. And 106 survived. Again, these people are insane when they say stuff like that. They're saying that because it's the deadliest industry on the planet. And so they have to play down every facet of this industry with absurd lies. This is not an industry that you should have on your planet. We were like kamikazes. Well, there is no kamikazes. You can't go in there and do something because everything was already done. It was already gone. It was already melted down. You can't mitigate it. You can't survive it. But what the idea of those stories is for you to have sympathy for the workers that were there, right? That's the idea, and that they done the best they could. And so when the truth slowly comes out later, you say, well, they done the best they could because you bought into the original propaganda. This industry shouldn't exist. It's not the right technology, and we don't know if fusion is going to be the right technology, but because you're talking about enormous temperatures, why would you go through all this trouble and put this on a pedestal claiming that it's the savior of humanity when it's the death of humanity and the death of 8 million species? And then when you do have a solution, it's called geothermal. It's everywhere. You can drill down anywhere on the planet. Once you get down deep enough, you're going to hit 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. That's warmer than gas, oil, coal, or nuclear. And now you can do the exact same thing. You can leave all the infrastructure at a coal plant, drill down, and leave the infrastructure there and turn it into a geothermal facility. You can do that with nuclear. You can do that with oil. You can do that with gas. You can do that with coal. And the community can just build their own. They don't need the degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency. They don't need terrorism laws. They don't need to spend 80 years. They haven't even tried to come up with a solution for the nuclear waste because it's splitting atoms. They can't contain it. If they can contain it, they would have done it. They had 80 years. Canada has $26 billion allocated from ratepayers that they stole from the ratepayers, but never ever come up with a solution. But they spend the interest on that every year. It's $26 billion for over 20 years. How much interest does $26 billion grow, I wonder, every year? Because it's the government, they got it invested in good stuff, right? But they can't come up with a solution. Germany can't come up with a solution. America can't come up with a solution. Japan, China, India, Pakistan. Nobody can come up with a solution. And then once you take the fuel out of the reactor cores after around 14 months, They put it in this pool where it's still splitting the same atoms as they were splitting to produce energy for 1 million homes and businesses, and that those atoms are released directly into the environment. There is no containment. It's guaranteed, even without a nuclear dumping, without nuclear accidents, the nuclear power plants are eventually going to exterminate all the species through the emissions from the fuel pool. At some point, that's because bioaccumulates in every species, and there's nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. And why I'm the only person out there running an educational program, it's unconscionable. It's absolutely unconscionable. When there's so many people out there so much smarter than I am, so much better positioned than I am. And then the ones that we see showing up will always take the pro-nuclear route, and they'll come out and they'll spend enormous amounts of money trying to convince you that there's no adverse side effects from this technology. It's not a technology, it's an extinction machine. And if you don't fight back, there is no future. It's your watch, it's your obligation, you're obligated. And forget about the Bill of Rights and Constitutions and Magna Cartas. You're a person on this planet, you're the steward. And if you're aware, then you're the steward. And it's your obligation, not some random next person, to awaken the planet, because the planet will come up with solutions. But it can't come up with solutions when you have nothing but sadistic demons calling themselves scientists just because they're highly educated. See, the problem with a highly educated, extremely evil person is they can do great harm. Enormous harm for enormous long periods of time. And if they have children, it's even worse because they'll grow up with the same particular attributes. And that's why you'll see these types of connotations. Should Fukushima nuclear meltdown site open a 6-week summer boot camp for the pro-nuclear kids? Look, I'm being spammed. Look at that. As we're talking, I'm being spammed with no votes. Well, why wouldn't you send their kids in there? It's harmless. It's like a banana. It's like a potato chip. It's like walking in sunshine. It's like climbing a mountain. It's like sleeping next to somebody. So what's the big deal? For 80 years, that's what they told you. So why would they say no? Why wouldn't they encourage their children to go to summer boot camp at the Fukushima Daiichi death machine? Why? I don't understand why they don't want to go there. I thought it was like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine. Why don't they let their kids go there? Radioactive flyers land in the United States. We kind of touched on this last night, didn't we? It was mentioned in another story that we were covering last night. 2 flights. This was March the 17th again. This is 6 days after the tsunami. 1 day after the last reactor blew up. The fourth reactor had blown up twice, I think, by that point. And the fuel pools. 2 flights originated in Tokyo, landed in Dallas and Chicago. Yesterday, triggered radiation detectors when passengers fly through customs. Telling a lie is the only thing that they can do. That's the only attribute that they got. They look like me and you, but they hate us, clearly. Milk from Fukushima found with radiation. Weisenthal. Now, we covered him many times over the number of years, at least 24 times over the last decade alone. Power lines are plugged into the nuke plant. Really, you plug power lines into multiple nuclear meltdowns that don't even exist anymore. Where nobody else can go, but you went there and plugged in power, did you? The U.S. military says 20,000 dependents in Japan are eligible for voluntary evacuations, according to the New York Post. Also, there are reports of low radiation detected in planes. No matter what they find, there's always going to be low radiation, according to the bizarre creatures, right? Flights from Tokyo trigger radiation alarms in Chicago and Dallas. Yeah, we actually covered a story that mentioned that last night on the same date. Right, so nuclear scientists and the journalists are the most deadly combination we've ever seen. They're way worse than the politicians. The politicians, not all of them, but the majority of them are quite scary. UK, because they're lobbyists for certain global interests, right? Military-industrial complexes, pharmaceuticals. US and the UK search and rescue teams will pull out of Japan tomorrow, according to the Telegraph. Thousands are still missing. And so they link you over, you go over there, of course, sorry, that page is gone. And every story, literally, the page is gone that they link you to. We've been doing this for years, right? Every story, everybody's gone. For real this time, NUKE Wire is reporting that a new power line, for real this time. They're reporting that a new power line has been installed at the plant. Yeah, really? Anybody really think a power line was installed? Right, the NUKE, and they go and interview them. They say, oh yeah, the power is connected. When you go over to the links, of course, they're always missing. The next best hope is to reconnect the plant to the grid with a new power line. Again, you had 2,000 square miles out in the Pacific, the size of Texas, swept off the coastline from the debris. At least that much sank too. It was 1,200 miles of coastline, or 1,200 kilometers of coastline. There was no telephone poles. Everything looked like a wood chipper had attacked it, right? The attempt will occur within hours, says TEPCO. Now, this is on the 17th. And so they typically show you journalists and a scientist, and then the journalist is just quoting whatever the scientist allegedly says, right? They don't show you these pictures, though, when they're saying that, do they? Because you'll be sitting there, how are they going to connect power to it, I wonder? Because they dumb down the majority, not the people that come to my shows, but 99.9% of the population of the entire planet is incapable of critical thinking when it comes to nuclear. They have no, the Spider-Man, the Hulk, the Simpsons, and the rest of it have destroyed their ability to rationalize anything when it comes to nuclear. You got to create a vaccine to get rid of their kids. Send your children to university to become vaccine doctors so they can create a vaccine to make the pro-nuclear community's children stupid. So they don't get the next job and destroy whatever's left. The threat of meltdown continues as water is exhausted in the spent fuel pools, in the spent pools. The threat of meltdown continues as water is exhausted in the spent pools. Well, the pools will boil dry in about 2.5 days. Once you get some of the fuel rod dry, it ignites. As soon as it comes in contact with air, it's a flash. It's igniting and it's burning at 1,800 degrees. And that'll ignite the plutonium uranium pellets because they're also coated with zirconium cladding. They burn when they ignite with or contact with oxygen. And then that will boil off the pool in just a matter of minutes because you're talking about up to 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And the only option is drop water. Once it happens, you can't drop water because now you'll have an explosion. And the only option is water drops by helicopters. U.S. authorities says radiation extremely high encourages all Americans to leave Japan. Here's the link to the State Department's warning. Of course, that's not going to be there. Why did these? It's so you don't need to take the page down. It's not like you're going to run out of pages on the internet. According to the new headline radiation levels jumped after the latest water shot. We got the videos of it, right? The water doesn't reach the reactors. The helicopters are so high in the air, they can't go close to it. How's anybody going in connecting power? You can't. How can you? This is so much radiation. You can't. You have to use a helicopter, but you can't get near it. But yet people are underneath it connecting power. Like, how do we ever get to this point where the world is so complacent that that law was even conceived, let alone? Radiation has surged again, and helicopter water spraying has come to a temporary halt. Excuse me. It wasn't a temporary halt. It just didn't happen in the first place. There were like 3 or 4 runs past it, and they gave up on it because they have the luxury of hindsight in 2011 because all 600 helicopter pilots in Chernobyl died, and Fukushima is at least 3,800 times worse because of the fuel pools. Because of the fact that they're pure uranium, pure plutonium, whereas Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. It was a brand new reactor. It had no fuel pools whatsoever. The reactor cores in the fuel pools are no different than the reactor cores that are running. It's the same thing. Once the chain reaction has ignited the fuel is splitting atoms. It doesn't matter if you take it out the next day, it still had gone through a chain reaction. So now its attributes are hideous. Right, they're always splitting atoms, and the worst kind. Plus, the energy is now, because like a normal unused fuel rod, you can pick it up with your hands. But when you put it through a chain reaction, if you can see it, you died before you can turn around and say, hey, what's that bright light? You're dead. The freak out abroad continues. There are reports of South Koreans arriving in Seoul from Japan with unusually high radiation levels. And the Hong Kong government urges citizens to leave the country. There are reports of, and you link over to something that's not legible, it doesn't even exist as usual. Japan Nuclear Agency cannot confirm whether water is covering the spent fuel rods. And number 4, and because they said they couldn't confirm it, then they weren't worried about it. Which is the strangest statement conceivable when you know anything about this subject whatsoever. Japan's nuclear agency cannot confirm whether water is covering the spent fuel rods in number 4. And of course, Reuters, which is CIA, right? And 1,800 controlled media will immediately regurgitate that by aggregating it with spider bots. If you think of a nuclear scientist and you don't think of him as looking like that, you're sadly mistaken. Because inside, that's who they are. Every one of them. Because none of them come out, not a one of them, in all these years have come out and told you that the reactor fuels were gone, the fuel pools were gone, and the reactor cores were gone. Because when they looked at that, they knew that. They didn't tell you, though. There's not a professor, a nuclear scientist, the nuclear regulatory agencies. Everybody in the nuclear industry knew the fuel pools and the reactor cores were gone. Every employee at every nuclear power plant worldwide looked at those pictures on day 6 and said the fuel pools are gone and the reactor cores are gone. And nobody come out and told you. Nobody come out and warned you. Nobody come out and tried to educate you. And if they had had a conversation, we might have come up with solutions to deal with what was left. They refuse to acknowledge their entire legacy that there's any bad attributes to nuclear anyway. Publicly. It's all going to come down to the plan to reconnect the power plant grid that's expected within hours and get ready for another day of obsessively watching the headlines. Like, it's they knew that on that day that they wrote these stories, they knew it looked like that. They knew it was all gone. And yet they came out and suggested to you that they were going to reconnect power to buildings that they knew doesn't exist anymore. There's nothing functional in either one of these two reactors, which were 19-story buildings, 65-meter buildings, 190-foot tall buildings. And the journalist's job was to sell you the lie, shove it down your throat over and over and over in every direction. That's why I'm bringing you tonight. The power plant will be rehooked to the grid soon, even though then it'll be a while before everything works at full speed. And this is what the reactors... And it's hard to comprehend that a couple of buildings can cause so much carnage. It's hard to appreciate that, isn't it? It's hard to appreciate that the fallout from it is like a snowstorm. You see up March the 18th. That's the plume the day after the story we're reading right now looked like, covering the planet. March the 22nd, March the 25th, and April the 7th, 26 days later. So the whole planet was a permanent snowstorm of radioactive fallout. So think of a snowstorm that covers the whole planet, and say after about 30 days. It starts in Japan. 30 days later, the whole planet is covered in a snowstorm. The snow never stops coming out, and it never goes away. It never melts. It never stops snowing, and it never stops coming from that source. But you can't see it. If you could see it, you'd never leave your house again. And all your pollen worldwide now is radioactive. This is why the pollinators are disappearing. And the sterilization of the species from the full body x-rays over the last number of years is now we know is catastrophic. And most of the little birds you're seeing are seed eaters, not insect eaters, because the majority of the insect eating birds have disappeared. And in dramatic die-offs of starvation, emaciation. So the plume covers the whole planet, and all the studies, this is the longest time it took it. Well, 30 days typically was the longest point. But by day 20, in every one of the models from all the major shakers and movers and institutions worldwide, shows symmetrically the whole planet was covered in a perpetual radioactive storm. And this never goes away. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. And so when you look at the global warming narrative, look at the post-2011, after 2011. When you go back, you'll see this narrative start to show up of global warming and turn into this absolute scream. And it's the same thing for supercell storms, typhoons and cyclones and hurricanes and derivatives. These anomalies of winds that we don't have any infrastructure on the planet. There's no building codes in any of the places where this is happening that have building codes for winds over 200 miles per hour and gusts of 300 miles per hour or 500 kilometers per hour. And this is what we're seeing. What just happened to Florida was unbelievable. Twice. Was it 2018 when they had 5 hurricanes in the Atlantic here in North America, United States mostly? They came ashore at almost 200 miles per hour, and he refused to say the word gust. And then he would downplay it and say 170 miles per hour. But when you looked at the actual documentation, you were looking at 200 miles per hour. When you look at the damage, the gust was clearly close to 300 miles per hour in many places. So it's hard to comprehend, because if a gas plant blows up, it doesn't leave a plume that covers the whole planet, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light, that attacks everything with replicating cells. And that's the same thing for oil and coal and gas. But nuclear is the only, your carbon from coal plants, which you can't have plants or trees or humans if you don't got carbon, by the way, or insects or birds or mammals or puppies without carbon. Carbon's not going to cause global warming. It's the most ridiculous assertion conceivable. Just let me just talk about that for a second, because that plume you see there is pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. And for some reason, and I get it, I guess, but for the majority of people, it's hard to appreciate what percentage of our atmosphere is carbon. This was a question put to the people in charge of it. in Congress, for instance. And I got another video there that's really helpful too. I'm going to play for you. I got to jack the audio up in this video just a little touch, so I might have to restart it. And so let me play this, and then I'm going to hit the audio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Panelists, let me just go right down the line real fast. What percent of our atmosphere is CO2? Take your best guess. You don't have to be accurate. All down the line.
Repeat that question.
What percent of our atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide? Wild guess, it's okay.
I'll bite 5%.
5?
I'll just follow you then.
We'll go 7. That's my favorite number.
I'll see their 5 and suggest that we know that transportation causes 49% of CO2, so that's why we're all working on energy transition.
All right. So what number do you think it is?
5.
5? How about you? I didn't hear you, Mr. Dreyer.
7.
7. Did you have one, Mr. Boyd?
So we got a 5, 7,
This price is right.
8. I'm going to
Okay.
get the high end.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and I don't mean to put you on ice. I ask a lot of people that because all we hear is climate change, CO2, CO2. I heard a couple of you on the panel saying you're looking to change your vehicles to electric, even though we don't have the electric grid. And me as a farmer, I wouldn't be real happy about running out and replacing $300,000, $500,000, $1 million pieces of equipment because someone wants it to be electric. The answer is 0.04%. Not 1%, not a half of a percent. It's 0.04%, and it's gone up from 0.03 over the last couple decades. This is what we're being all contorted into doing, is this tiny change in CO2. If we get below 0.02, plant life starts dying off.
So if it just drops a little bit, plant life will die off. But there's another video. I'm going to introduce you to that. This is a video on growing food, plants, in more CO2 versus current. 442 days was the impact of 180% increase in atmospheric CO2. And so the high CO2 is to your right, and you see the plants immediately starting to get
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Panelists, let me just go right down the line real fast. What percent of our atmosphere is CO2? Take your best guess. You don't have to be accurate. All down the line.
Repeat that question.
What percent of our atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide? Wild guess, it's okay.
I'll bite 5%.
5?
I'll just follow you then.
We'll go 7. That's my favorite number.
I'll see their 5 and suggest that we know that transportation causes 49% of CO2, so that's why we're all working on energy transition.
All right. So what number do you think it is?
5.
5? How about you? I didn't hear you, Mr. Dreyer.
7.
7. Did you have one, Mr. Boyd?
So we got a 5, 7,
This price is right.
8. I'm going to
Okay.
get the high end.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and I don't mean to put you on ice. I ask a lot of people that because all we hear is climate change, CO2, CO2. I heard a couple of you on the panel saying you're looking to change your vehicles to electric, even though we don't have the electric grid. And me as a farmer, I wouldn't be real happy about running out and replacing $300,000, $500,000, $1 million pieces of equipment because someone wants it to be electric. The answer is 0.04%. Not 1%, not a half of a percent. It's 0.04%, and it's gone up from 0.03 over the last couple decades. This is what we're being all contorted into doing, is this tiny change in CO2. If we get below 0.02, plant life starts dying off.
So 0.0 is hundreds. You're talking about hundreds, right? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Calling this industry crazy is probably being polite, as far as I can tell. Japan Nuclear Agency, this is on the 16th, which is 5 days later, says nuke plant could be reconnected to the power grid that afternoon. Of course, it looked like that. So what they were doing was destroying our ability to have a future, right? So the journalists and the scientists and the media feeds it to you, and they just tell you these lies, and don't worry about it. We got the best of the best at working at it. And they're sacrificing their lives, and it's just unthinkable. And so you get caught up in this drama, but you don't get the rationale. They don't show you any pictures. They just, as you see, I'm showing you pictures. I'm showing you these pictures and this picture, because that's the reactors, and the significance of it shouldn't. And I know you can become complacent because you see the same picture over and over. That's what they're counting on, right? It's hard to believe that the plume covers the planet, so your friends, your families, your children, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your parents, your grandparents, your pets, the species, the nature, is all being full body x-rays, which are nasty, catastrophic damage to your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells. But you're bioaccumulating it, and your body has to attack all of that for the rest of your life every second with white blood cells. And because it's pulsing energy at the speed of light, your body has to repair all the damage every second for the rest of your life. It can't do that, which means your immune system is completely compromised. And so a bad flu can kill you, and it does now, because your immune system is compromised, and that's a tipping point, right? And so the elderly and the young become exceptionally vulnerable, and the elderly are people that work their whole life so you can enjoy your day and have all the freedoms, and we disrespect them because of Simpsons, and the cartoon industry has targeted the heroes of our times, the elderly, and demonized them and vilified them because your media is so corrupt, your academic community is unbelievably corrupt. And I'm being very polite because I'm going to use the word corrupt, but I'm being exceptionally polite about it when I use that word. Meanwhile, the Stars and Stripes was the military machine, the very last people you want to trust, has details on the Pentagon's worst case scenario disaster preparations. So when you look for it, you can't find it, can you? Because, what, they're going to run out of internet space on their website? Of course not. And so that's why these particular stories are so important, because they still exist. But all the links to the stories for their supporting documentation doesn't. And their documentation was pure lies. Everything they linked to was pure lies, and it was all removed. Every bit of it. Page unavailable. Oops. ABC News, Australia. All of the water is gone from one of the spent fuel pools, says U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Like, if all the water is gone from a spent fuel pool, which you're talking about 4 or 5 reactor cores, are melting down. And all it gets is a couple of sentences. It means there's nothing to stop the fuel rods from getting hotter and melting down. So the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission's chief, Gregory Jaczko, suggested that there's nothing to stop the fuel rods from getting hotter. Instead of telling you that the minute that the fuel is exposed to oxygen, it detonates. It burns at unbelievable temperatures because of the zirconium claddings, which then ignites the uranium plutonium pellets, which are also coated in zirconium. It'll boil the rest of the water off almost instantaneously. Because it's a flash, it's an explosion, right? You've seen the explosion. Explosion, right? And then the inventories that were rejected, just each of these reactors are worse than all nuclear reactors in history combined by orders of magnitudes I can't even articulate because it's so hideous. It's around £6 million per building. And this industry, it has all the cards are marked, right? And you got to rise up above this. You are, like, the people that come here rarely are the most educated people imaginable. They just don't, a lot of them don't understand it. They don't appreciate it. They've never been challenged. But there's not many people who's going to beat the regular people that come to these programs, these presentations. In fact, I can't imagine anybody's going to beat the people anybody that's here regularly. The chicken necks are not going to beat them in a debate. The nuclear scientists can't beat them because they'll beat the shit out of them with the truth. Meanwhile, stars and stripes detail the Pentagon's worst case scenario, and it's all gone, right? Oh, I meant to bring that down here. That's what it was. And so the journalists always, right, very accommodating, very helpful, wonderful. They're always considered so nice. They're my favorite journalists. Can't wait to see the news tonight. And their job is to cut your throat. And they knew that. They went to university, get that particular job, get incredible education, to come and lie to you. So that sounds crazy, I know, but that's how the world actually works. Meanwhile, TEPCO says it can't confirm when a power line meant to ease the crisis will be completed, contradicts an earlier report that said the power line was nearly ready, which caused the market to shoot higher. So they come out and said, oh, no, they're going to connect power. So people start investing back in stocks. So now they're selling their stocks, right, to capitalize on the people that were complacent and just bought stocks, stole their money, right? And that's what the industry does. Right? They'll sit there and the scientists will say, oh, no, we're going to have power connected. And then all of a sudden the stocks... The Japanese electric company said that a new power line will solve the nuclear crisis, will solve it, despite the fact that it looks like that. They won't show you that picture, though, will they? They don't show you any pictures in any of these stories, by the way. And that headline has seen markets rebound as a result, when it's simply not true. There's nothing too evil for these people to do. That's what I find incredible about this story, is there really isn't anything so evil the nuclear academics and journalists won't tell you. There's no lie they won't tell you. They don't give a frig how many billions of people's lives are destroyed by it. There's no lie they won't tell you. And that's all they're going to tell you is lies. Should Fukushima nuclear meltdown site open a 6-week summer boot camp for the pro-nuclear kids? Yeah, well, of course they should. Why wouldn't you? It's the best thing you can do for the species and humanity is send them there. This follows disturbing comments from U.S. authorities. Energy Secretary Stephen Cho said a reactor may have experienced a partial meltdown. Now, he knew that's what it looked like. He knew the reactors were gone. He knew the fuel pools were gone. He knew the reactor cores were gone. He knew that there was multiple buildings. It wasn't just these two. There were multiple buildings with those particular catastrophic attributes. And that it was worth, like 3 Mile Island, it would take 800 3 Mile Islands to equal one of these buildings. And the Energy Secretary knew it. And I come here as often as I can. It's been really difficult for me this last few days because the new glasses are making me sick all day long. They're taking the life out of me, trying to get used to it. And when I'm sitting here doing this show, they're best kind, because I'm basically still. I didn't get progressive glasses. I guess I should have, but I couldn't afford it. So we'll just roll out a journalist and roll out a nuclear scientist And then they'll tell you everything is peaches and creams and nuclear is a saving grace. It's carbon free. It's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine. You just trust them because they look a lot more nicer than I do, right? A lot more presentable than me. Also, U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Committee Chief Gregory Jasko said radiation levels are extremely high. And he believes Reactor 4 has no water. His call for the radius to be evacuated larger than that called for by the official government. Now, he might have said something different, and the media came out and said what they said. Like if a nuclear scientist comes up to me and says, "Hi, Dana, I'm a nuclear scientist," I'm going to say, "Get away from me. Don't come near me." And why would you trust these creatures, these mass murdering serial killers, these ecocide and omnicide machines? The U.S. government is telling its citizens that live within 50 miles to remain indoors or evacuate. Click for a map to show you the affected areas. Don't be so foolish because you know it's not going to be there, right? Now the EU Energy Commissioner responsible for the earlier catastrophe comment says he did not say a catastrophe was going to happen. Well, he would have known on that date that they wrote this article. He knew what it looked like. He said that's a catastrophe. He was right. He had to retract that. And all he had to do was come up with this picture and say, yeah, it's a catastrophe. But he's not allowed to do that. He had to come out and grovel to the nuclear industry. Rather, that was his fear. And the International Atomic Energy Agency denied the situation is out of control. But clearly that's out of control. Reactors are gone. The fuel pools are gone. And why are you listening to the International Atomic Energy Agency? You're listening to them because journalists sold them to you. They don't have any authority in your country. They don't have any sovereignty over any country, let alone the nuclear industry. They shouldn't exist. They're a corporation called UN. And they've infiltrated every facet of everybody's life because they have so many subsidies, the UN does. You would be shocked if you comprehended. You go look them up and see how many subsidies of companies they have and how many of them that you've unknowingly had contact with. It's frightening. It's unconscionable. And the nuclear industry couldn't have got away with what it's getting away with if it wasn't for this military-industrial complex that goes by another moniker known as UN. Now the EU Energy Commissioner responsible for the earlier says he didn't say it. Fuel rods in reactor 4, 5, and 6 are exposed. Wow. Wow, listen to that statement. Well, if fuel rods in reactor 4, 5, and 6 are exposed, they're melting down. Right? That's an incredible statement. That's an insane statement is what that statement actually is, isn't it? And the problem with the whole thing is there's so many of these statements. Right? And they roll out the pretty journalists and the academic. They always look a little weird and they're always very happy and don't worry, it's like a banana and a potato chip. And I mean, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radioactive fallout and 3% of the land in the Fukushima prefecture, which meant they should have abandoned half of Japan. And certainly Fukushima prefecture. Even today, even in 100 years, it should be abandoned. It's never too late to move people out of a nuclear wasteland. That's pretty straightforward logic. EU Energy Minister responsible for earlier comments claimed he got his information from the EU, the International Atomic Energy Agency, Japan, and media reports. But he was not forced, he just came out and groveled, he didn't say. Horrible headlines crossing the wires. This is all on the 17th. We're still on the 17th of March 2011. And I mean, this stuff is the most important stuff. Because this was the few times there was Like this is the cover story, and this story's been going strong now for 13 years, right? EU energy chief says possible catastrophic event in next hour. He also, and this is via the Dow Jones, calling the situation out of control. And the market briefly got hammered by this, but has already recovered. Because the other media came out with a lie and said that he lied or he didn't know what he was talking about. Or it's unbelievable the way. And I know the Japanese government, I can't remember the numbers any longer. Like $150 billion just the first week they dumped back in to the market to try to bring it back up so that they can sell their shares, right? And the powers that be can sell their shares and get their money back before, and then trick other people. What they're doing is they're tricking. When you see the market got hammered but it already recovered, is they're tricking people into buying shares. That's what all the share. Oh, now's the time to buy it. It's good now. People are bailing up. But don't worry, you'll get your money. You'll make good profit if you buy it right now. And people are like, okay, buy. The worst thing that happened to us, I think, is the stock market and nuclear, of course. See, the market's recovered. Everything's good. And now, according to the Kyoto Wire, there are concerns at Reactor 5 and 6. Well, we have pictures that were released in 2021. 739, I believe it was. I've done several presentations on this site on those pictures. From a drone, a very high-quality camera, which is pretty incredible because you're talking about 2011. And when you zoom in on those pictures that have never been seen for the previous decade, Reactor 6 is completely pixelated out. And so is the stack, the exhaust stack, and so is the pump house. There's a name for it I can't remember for some reason. And the common spent fuel pool is pixelated out. And so was Reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. Why did they release those pictures? Because they wanted to warn. Somebody wanted to warn you. Somebody had pains of conscience. Somebody had pains of conscience. Somebody had sleepless nights. And a depressing read here from the New York Times sizing up the situation. U.S. calls radiation extremely high. New York Times. And this picture, we've seen this many times, right? And according to their concerns of Reactor 5 and 6. But they pretended nothing happened at Reactor 5 and 6, right? And they kind of look like Reactor 2. They look pretty normal. But it's pretty rare to get any pictures of Reactor 5 and 6. And we do have headlines of Reactors 5 and 6. Let me just bring up a couple of quick headlines of 5 and 6. Kind of reminds me of this again. Hang on here. Oh, I clicked the wrong one. Bear with me. I'll bring up this stuff first. Reactor 5 and 6. I got pictures too. It was wait a bear with me. We're almost there. Yeah, the turbine hulls is what I was talking about. I just got to get through 5 more. Almost there. All right, here we go. Before I get to this, because I know I'm going to forget about it. Never mind. New 311 footage shows disaster loomed at Fukushima reactor number 5. Number 5 cooling system stops. Backup not yet working. An analyst showed number 1 was melting 50 minutes after the cooling stopped. Major study. Reactor number 5 releases may explain why so much radioactive xenon was detected. That's a major study suggesting that reactor 5 had a significant release, which meant that was a meltdown. That's the radioactive. They were talking mostly xenon-133, which burns a hole through your lung, ends up in your bone. But you never hear them talking about it after, right? Number 5 and 6 contained 8,000 tons of radioactive water. Like, if it's radioactive water, you're not going to transfer to a mega float because the mega float needs to be 6 feet thick to shield anybody on the float. And then the pipes, the hoses that they're going to use, you can't walk past that or then or ever after. How are you going to chop that stuff up and get rid of it and everything else, right? It's simply not true. So it might have been pumped, but out into the ocean by people that had no concept of what nuclear is. TEPCO uses radioactive water from reactor 5 and 6 to spray throughout the Fukushima plant 100 tons a day. Again, this kind of a statement is the cover stories. That's what we see a lot, is these types of cover stories where they come out July the 1st and say there's 8,000 tons of water. In October the same year, they say the water is being used to spray everywhere because they need to quantify where the water went. Well, we sprayed it on the reactors, and that's why it is not there no more. Well, most likely you couldn't contain it because of the earthquake and the damage from the tsunami. And why would you have that much radioactive water floating around anyway? Trouble at Fukushima number 5 and 6, the cracks allowing in radioactive water could destroy emergency generators and other vital equipment. White smoke from Fukushima Daiichi reactor number 6 turbine buildings, which was pixelated out. Over 6 feet at number 6 of contaminated water in the turbine buildings. And the turbine buildings, that's number 6 and that's number 5. So they look like they're relatively intact, but that don't mean they are. Reactor number 6 now has over 6 feet of contaminated water in the turbine building. Water in the reactor building may cause cooling systems to fail. I don't know how the hell did you ever get the fuel pools of reactor 5 and 6 dealt with. I still haven't been able to appreciate how that played out. There's no documentation whatsoever available, which leads you to believe that they didn't, right? And that it went China syndrome straight down to the earth. It's hard to appreciate how incredibly thick these buildings are. Cesium found near the drainage gates of reactor 5 and 6. Cesium rises by reactor 5 and 6 discharge. Cesium rises from the discharges of reactor 5 and 6. Again, this would be it can't just be cesium. Reactor 5 and 6 were not in cold shutdown after the quake. So when you're doing maintenance or you're changing fuel, you're only taking a little bit of the fuel out. These are very fragile, very, very vulnerable at that point, right? And they usually got like 1,000, 1,500 employees there for that particular job. Fresh fuel had been loaded into both reactors. Cooling at spent fuel number 5 stopped until the cables were installed. But how could you install cables at a nuclear meltdown? Or even a partial meltdown? You can't, right? And how could you install, even though these buildings look like that, just bear with me. Let me explain to you what, let me show you a bunch of pictures from the tsunami, because That's missing from the equation, isn't it? It's so difficult to appreciate it. I understand that. I got a couple of pictures that'll help you though. There we go, we're almost ready. And there we go. So the tsunami done that to 1,200 kilometers of the coastline. Just entertain me for a minute. Hang on for a second. Just bear with me. I got a great way of explaining, but sometimes I got to go in a roundabout way to get to it because you can't. There's so many facets to this story. And the system I got is designed to handle anything I throw at it. It's a spectacular system, right? But it has its flaws. So think about how are you going to connect power when, like, the tsunami ran through the site. Does that make sense? The tsunami ran through the country, but it also ran right through the nuclear plant site. It ran right, and reactors, they're tall buildings, right? But the common spent fuel pool was at ground level, right behind reactor 4. Now, when it comes in, it's coming in at very high speeds, isn't it? Incredible speeds. And as wave after wave comes in, and it's like a big wood chipper going through your country. Everything's detonating all around you. The plumes are covering the planet, and the typical is 10 or 20 to 30 days. In all the institutions, there was Norwegian Institute of Air Research, 468 hours, 19.5 days, 19 and a half days. Every model is showing you the same thing, the whole planet covered in radioactive fallout. But I got the map. I might have to go put it the other way here. Hang on a second. Let me drag up the map. It'll take me a minute. Of where people died. So you can really appreciate the enormity of this equation, because you got to put this equation in. There we go. It's really something, actually. It's so hard to get the truth from the industry. Apparently we don't have the map in this section. Let's try some more pictures here. It's hard to comprehend the trauma of everybody, but it's really difficult to comprehend how you connected power when 1,200 miles of the coastline looked like that. Oh my goodness, bear with me. Yeah, my system is working extra hard. Generally, it's pretty cooperative, right? If I leave it alone for a while, it'll come to its senses. Let's go back to this story for a few minutes. According to the broadcaster, Japan Defense Forces aborted its latest plan to spray water on the fuel pools, for instance, Reactor 3. Well, here's reactor 3. They're not going to show you these pictures. That's reactor 3. And at the fuel pools, reactor cores are at the top of the buildings. So there's 2 fuel pools at the very top, and then there's the reactor cores at the top of the buildings. And that was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. NHK released pictures showing again just how badly damaged reactor 3 and 4 are. Well, that's reactor 3. And that's reactor 3 detonating, reactor 1 detonating. For some reason, you don't have pictures of reactor 4 detonating. And every time I see, well, reactor 4 is to your left. I'll show you a better picture come up in a minute, hopefully. So reactor 3, again, when you look at reactor 3, these are not 190-foot buildings anymore, are they? Bear with me, actually, we got some other important stuff here I can show you. That we were talking about earlier, but these were the drone pictures that got released. So these are the reactors, but up there is the common spent fuel pool. It's on the same street, on the same level, but except it's a lower building. Right? And when the tsunami ran through, that's the same street as these buildings. That tsunami ran right through all the reactors and the common spent fuel pool. So that's the common spent fuel pool. Why is that pixelated out? Where were these pictures released in 2021 on the 10th anniversary? Well, the beginning of that year, really. Renewed nuclear chain reaction feared at the spent fuel storage pool. So they're talking about a chain reaction at the spent fuel pool? So they're telling you right there on March the 20th, on day 9, that the spent fuel pool had caught fire, the common spent fuel pool, which is right behind reactor 4. Common spent fuel pool had 6,375 spent fuel assemblies. Well, each assembly is 1,800 pounds. They're only spent by 3%. 97% of the inventory is still absurdly capable of contaminating the entire biosphere. Fukushima radioactive inventory is 30 to 40 times as high as in Chernobyl. Now, each reactor core was around 100 Chernobyls, because Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. Fukushima, pure uranium plutonium, they're massive reactors, and the fuel pools had decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings. They're all gone. So why was the common spent fuel pool completely pixelated out? These pictures were released. I'm the only person I know of that talked about these fuel pools, these pictures, rather. And so originally this was from a drone very high up in the air. And I went through all the pictures, and I was like going through all the pictures, and they were all very high shots. And I zoomed in a few times in different parts of the site, and I said, well, I'll just go through all the pictures, 730-something pictures. And I was just clicking through all the pictures. I downloaded them all from a Chinese site that I had translated, and it was linked over to the TEPCO's website. And these pictures had just been released, but nobody's ever talked about it. I'm the only one I know about it that has ever come out and done videos and showed it to you, or ever talked about it. And so the reactor number 6 was also missing, was pixelated completely out. And I still want to show you I just got to go backwards a little bit. Here we go. No. Here might be getting there. The problem is I have so much. And it's not like I'm going to give up or anything, but other people don't have the patience to sit there and wait. So this is reactor 4, what's left of it. Now remember, this was supposed to be a 190-foot building. And at the very top of these buildings is the fuel pool and the reactor core. They're at the top of the buildings, not the bottom of the building. So they cleaned that up with the homeless and remote control equipment. And there's nothing left. The reactor cores and the fuel pools are gone. They don't exist anymore. And how can you have pictures of reactor 1 and 3 exploding but not have pictures of reactor 4 exploding? Because the damage to reactor 4, as you can see, was incredible. So how can you not have pictures of that? And stuff I wanted to find, yeah. And so what they done to this building was they built this contraption right alongside of it. And then they went way above that. They built this offsite, then they assembled it. And so then they built it way up in the air above the site, because the building is way down here. Like, whatever you're looking at right there, you can see the debris on the roof right there. There was a single high-quality picture about 7 years ago of the site. It was really high quality. And I was able to zoom in and capture all kinds of details that have been missing up to that point for the first 8 years or so. And when you look at the building, you can see all the carnage still sitting there. Why didn't they clean that up? But because officially, what Arnie Gunnarsson and Helen Callercott and the rest of them are trying to suggest is that inside the building, that doesn't exist anymore, inside of this building, or not inside of it, but 100 feet above the stump, it looks like that over there. And then what kind of planet is that acceptable? Arnie Gunnarsson and Helen Callicott are notorious for doing it, by the way. And Arnie used to make the assemblies, or the fuel racks, for the assemblies for the fuel pools. So if he doesn't know the fuel pool is gone, who the frig would? Right? And he's produced so much footage. And right from the get-go, he was out there strong. And everybody was donating to him. And now they done the same thing at Reactor as Reactor 4, or hoodwinked you. They done the same thing to Reactor 3, right? Reactor 3 actually looks like that over there. And then they put this contraption over. It doesn't physically touch the building, what's left of it. And then they claim that, I guess some of those headlines come up in a second. And they claims they were in the building, I think it was 2019 or something, to 2020, and they claimed they were in the building. That's their stories. We came out and attacked them for 6 days straight. And I mean, I attacked them. Everybody was claiming that they're in the fuel pools of Reactor 4 and Reactor 3. I have attacked them relentlessly because the world is too busy being hoodwinked. I prefer to say that rather than acknowledge that the world so they built this contraption on top of somewhere else, and then this contraption, and they claimed it was like that on the inside of everything was normal in a building that don't exist anymore. So it's very confusing, isn't it? And it reminds me, of a story. I won't get the story right. It's a long time ago. There's a story about a man named Albert Haushofer. He was a Geolog, geologist at the University of Berlin when the war was raging over in Europe. And he got that job of keeping his mouth shut, right? And the Nazis were going around rounding up the Jews, as they like to say, and began having pains of conscience. And so he started writing this little letter, and he started getting a bit of a following. So the Nazis, of course, showed up and put a bag over his head and put him in the back of a truck and took him to a jail. And the Nazis were very particular, apparently. unlike the Israelis right now. The Nazis wanted a confession before they would shoot you or hang you. That was their preferred method of execution. But they wanted a confession. Unlike the Israelis you see doing today, they just slaughter everything and everybody, right? But the Nazis wanted a confession. Haushofer wouldn't give them a confession. And so it was getting close to the end of the war, and they shot him anyway. And when they picked him up, his body up, to dispose of it, to bury it, this little settle, this little piece of paper, fell out of his pocket. And they picked it up, and it was his confession. It was written in the form of a sonnet. And anybody, I don't know if anybody speaks German. It's Schultz, guilty. Yeah, I'm guilty, but it's not what you think. I should have schaffen, Unheil, Unheil. I should have more sharply called evil, evil. A schattige Wand, I believe. I did warn, but not enough. And now I know what I'm guilty of. And that's the predicament we're all in right now. Is I do personally warn, but I'm not going to be Albert Haushofer. I'm warning you all the time. I'm out here providing you with the documentation that is undeniable. It's incontestable. It's unassailable. And that the world has never reacted upon it. And we went out and done research expeditions that was just brutal for 4 to 5 months a year. And I was never healthy. I got hurt in a commercial diving accident a long time ago. And I was forced to do things that are impossible for someone of my health status. And had to do it for year after year after year, go out and do research expeditions. That were just, it was brutal. It was unbelievably brutal. And I'm still traumatized by everything because I met this all day, every day. And the world just won't wake up. There's nobody out there will pick up the baton. And I've been at it for a very long time. I've been at it for 22 years, but I've been at it ever since Fukushima happened. And I've been at it hard. I used to do 7 days a week. If I wasn't out on research expeditions for months and months at a time, I was doing these shows and presentations 7 days a week. And what have we called out over just the last decade? I wonder, 20,000, 30,000 journalists or something? At least 5,000 scientists and academics we have called out and for lying and proved and showed the documentation, moved on to the next one. You can't keep up with it. A perpetual lie. Everything comes out of nuclear industry is a perpetual lie. And we've challenged that. My goodness, have we ever challenged that? We've challenged it. And we will continue to challenge it. We will never surrender. We will never give up. We will never step back. We always take a step forward. When they get in our face, we always take 3 steps forward. We never take a step backwards. That's the thing about us, is we never, ever go backwards. We always push forward. And these pictures that were released, there was also pictures of the common spent, not just the common spent fuel pool pixelated out, but Reactor 6 completely pixelated out, and another picture west of the site. I'm going to have to cover those pictures again, do it all again at one point in the near future. And what Harvard University, Yale University, Stanford University, Oxford University, MIT University, Berkeley University done when this happened is unconscionable. Their experts came out and they lied, and we challenged them. We took all their presentations and went out and dissected it and showed you the documentation that they were actually lying, moved on to the next lie. A very painstaking, a very frightening amount of work. It's unbelievable. And they burned all of my books on my other site, which had It's around 1,500 presentations on my other YouTube channel. They took that down when I was out looking for spiders, and all of my research expeditions was on that site from 6 years on the ocean. Which, again, is just unbelievable that somebody would do that. Somebody that can be that evil. That they could actually be that evil to do something like that. I'm not a bad person for fighting for everything and everybody on this planet. How am I a bad person for doing the things I'm doing? How am I a bad person for being honest? How does that work? Because there's quite a lot of them out there. If you go look up my name, you'll find the most vile things said about me. But if you come and watch my presentations and my videos, you'll find out that I'm actually a really decent person. I'm a very honest person. I'm very sincere. I'm very genuine. And I don't mean any harm to any humans. I don't consider anybody in the nuclear industry to be human. And I can back that up. Calling a nuclear scientist a human, it should be a crime against humanity. A nuclear scientist is your enemy. It'll always be your enemy whether I exist or not. They are clearly your enemy. They have lulled you into a complacency that the average person can't comprehend. My throat's dried out here. I'll just call it a night. Let's close the poll down. Should Fukushima nuclear meltdown site open a 6-week summer boot camp for pro-nuclear kids? If it's so harmless and innocuous and benign, why not, right? What's the big whoop? Give me all the thumbs down. What are you hiding why are you hiding if they got nothing to hide? And see everybody tomorrow night, hopefully. I'm going to play James Lewis. It's one of James got a bunch of new songs up on his YouTube channel, folks. Check him out. You'll see him in the comments section. And this is one of his songs. He's got many different genres. And so if this is not your cup of tea, he's got lots of music, anti-nuclear music. It's fantastic stuff. Incredible amount of effort and time and energy put into it. I'm just going to shut my pie hole. We'll play this song out, and I'll see everybody tomorrow night. You have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Hugs for you and your loved ones and your friends and family. We'll see you on the next show. Take care, folks.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division, fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford show, the chatter's turning wild, but Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to see life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says, hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.